next thing that we're going to talk about today is going to be BPC-157. And this, for those that don't know, is a peptide. It's got some extraordinary properties and potential. And it's another one of those weird ones that those weird research compounds that you wonder, why hasn't this been explored in human context yet further? You know, it's had some human tests and trials that have been done on a small scale, but like nothing really extensive. And given it's the nature of the research and the encouraging results, you know, you would think that it would have been adopted by somebody. And it's kind of almost like, in a sense, without giving away too much, you know, it's almost like a peptide that does it all.
It's what's called the healing peptide. You know, it's not healing something specific, but multifactorial healing.
Yeah,
comes into play.
So we will be going over that in a second. Actually, we're gonna cover that, and then after that, we might have some time for a little bit of free flow conversation.
Talk about whatever.
And as always, that should be fun. You know, that's the highlight of our time for sure. And we are going to be doing a little bit of a switch in format again, as we're trying to figure things out, like as far as timing goes, what makes sense to try to fit in one podcast, and what makes sense to, you know, kind of spread out amongst multiple weeks. So what we ended up kind of deciding on for now, unless we change it again, is we're going to try out doing a nootropic topic and either a machine learning topic or a neuroscience topic. So we're going to kind of try and condense down like the important information of the nootropics and what you need to know, and kind of do a really good job of distilling things down, because we're not trying to go over like all of the details and like
a lot of details
in depth, you know, and that can be stuff that resources we can make available to you later, or that you can do on your research, you can do on your own. But what we kind of want to do is give you the down and the low of the what research has been done, where it's at, what are its properties and effects, how dangerous or safe is it, and you know, the extent to which it's been studied and that kind of stuff. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about BPC-157?
Yeah, so it's a small protein fragment, so peptide made up of 15 amino acids, and it was originally found in human gastric juice. And so you can think of it as potentially part of the body's natural protective system of the gut. So a key interesting feature is its remarkable stability. It can obviously survive in those harsh acidic environments in the stomach for over 24 hours and can resist enzymatic breakdown.
So that would suggest that it could be taken orally and survive, you know, the oral the oral digestion process, right?
Yeah, so that is for sure. And so all of this has led to a lot of excitement, obviously, around BPC-157 because of its potential long-term effect and minimal dosages. You know, it's kind of like you can have it in that 24-hour period, and it lasts even a bit longer. So you could take it like first day, wait a day, take it again, and still have a nice prolonged effect.
That seems like it would have a lot of kind of potential relevance as almost a daily supplement. So I mean, with that said, it's kind of a good lead into like some of the interesting, you know, clinical studies that have been done on it, because there is a certain lack of human research. There's some that's been done on it, but
there's some preclinical studies.
But there's some preclinical stuff that is, you know, interested or
yielded some pretty interesting, results. Yeah. Some excitement there.
Yeah, like the and this compound, like guys, this compound does so much. Like,
it's pretty crazy.
It's so multifaceted. And part of that has to do with like its mechanisms, which, it interacts with the gut brain, axis. So it's going to be, have interactions, both neurological and, and directly within the body and the gut. And as we know, the gut has a lot of impact, and health of the gut has a lot of impact on all the other systems. And so, and part of that has to do with that neural connection there too. But, the animal studies that have been done actually show that it has pleiotropic effects, meaning that it is a pretty much, it's like a generalized, like healing, multifaceted compound. And so there's been specific animal studies that have been done that have shown each of these like different effects that this compound has. For instance, it has amazing healing potential. Their preclinical studies showed that it can accelerate the healing process in various tissues, including your dermal layer, and then it also has gastrointestinal regenerative effects. So it can help to and this particular portion of its effect that there's a lot of strong evidence for, but basically a lot of these studies have shown that it can help for healing things such as ulcers and gut lesions caused by alcohol, stress, even certain drugs, and can help in that regard with recuperating from surgery as well. So it has this like really interesting kind of healing, regenerative effect on organs too, which to me is like a huge benefit for aging, because as we age, our organs and our internal systems start like slowly degrading and declining, stop functioning as well. And with that comes more, it's almost like a snowball effect of
like it seems BPC-157 activates the specific pathways that are particular for organ longevity, and this would almost make sure that everything is safe and healthy, and it stimulates the correct environment for that to be the case. And you talked about the GI tract, and that also means it could be applicable for something like irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, things of that nature as well.
For sure, yeah. And I don't know if you noticed in the research, but it was shown to have also effects not just on your organs, but on your muscles.
You get ripped.
Your tendons, ligaments, your cells, like the it helps with both muscle and tendon and ligament repair, and can even help with bone fractures.
Wow.
Like I'm literally naming all the different elements of the body.
Yeah, and it's just helping with all of them.
The skeletal system, the muscular system, we've got the organs and the digestive system, we've got the brain, we got
tendons, everything.
And another thing it's got going for it, and probably one of its many mechanisms, is that it's a powerful anti-inflammatory. It can reduce levels of inflammation and inflammatory markers, specifically like IL-6 and TNF alpha, and create a better environment within your body for repair. And you also mentioned something earlier about what it does with your vascular system. You want to hit on that?
Oh, yeah. So pretty much BPC-157 helps with and promotes angiogenesis. So angiogenesis is the formation of new blood vessels, which is crucial for getting oxygen and nutrients for injured areas in your body. And so,
like even creating a connection to like those
exactly.
those
So
area.
it better establishes the information that can assimilate to tell the repair functions of the system that this is something that needs to be repaired. And then it also helps regulate the actual nutrient and oxygen environment for that repair, which is quite the incredible thing. And, as it also kind of touches on neuroprotection a bit, and it protects, so pretty much BPC-157 was shown to protect nerve cells against diverse damage in animal models. And this could also be somewhat connected to angiogenesis and the fact that new blood vessels can then facilitate that nutrients as well.
Nitrogen flow.
Yeah, which gives the the glial cells and astrocytes the ability to facilitate that repair neuronally.
Yeah, interesting. And specifically, I remember in the neuroprotective area, it's able to help protect your brain from, at least the research suggests that it's able to help protect your brain from harsh drugs that can block like receptor functionality, and such as NSAIDs, and can also help protect your brain from injuries like stroke.
Yeah, that's huge.
And traumatic brain injury, and help it repair from traumatic brain injury. And even improve things like memory and coordination,
it makes, when you think of strokes, it's almost like it helps the regulate the excitatory stimulation of neurons as well, and proper modulation depending on the context of the situation, so you don't get this overabundance of depolarization. It can help that those action potentials self-regulate.
And it's particularly in its like the kind of the subject of its repair and its effect on nerve and brain connection and whatnot. Something that I particularly found interesting was that in spinal cord models, it showed they can actually help reduce the level of tissue damage, as well as improve motor function.
Oh my
spinal cord
goodness. Yeah.
Which is nutty, because that's been one of those other things that's kind of like it's really been stumping us as far as like figuring out how to handle those kind of injuries effectively.
Yeah, so exploring how BPC-157 could interact with the spinal cord related to those injuries might shed some light for facilitating other drugs that can be more specific to that thing, which is fairly important when you think about it.
Yeah,
it really does need to be explored.
And maybe even for things like, it might even have further application for things such as scoliosis, which is something that I deal with.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
And like the back pain that comes from like the inflammation of the muscles and like the nerve damage and all that kind of stuff that comes along with that. Like I would imagine that if BPC is able to help with with hardcore direct spinal cord injuries and damage, I'd imagine it would be able to also help with things like that, which would be an interesting area of research to kind of get into, and maybe another interesting study to do on that topic. But and here's one of the reasons why I found it interesting, and actually one of the reasons why I found the peptide in general, and started zeroing in on it and deciding, if it was something that I wanted to research more and go into, possibly on the podcast. And this I'll just go over it real fast. The BPC-157 has actually had a lot of research that suggests that it has a huge effect on the dopamine system, specifically modulating it.
Okay.
Instead of just boosting or blocking like dopamine receptors, for instance, or blocking enzymes that would, break down dopamine, and things like that, and having a direct impact, on the output of the dopamine receptors, pushing it, positive or negative. It has a modulatory effect and seems to act as a normalizer for dopamine.
That's so cool.
Restoring things back to their normal state. And that's not just on the dopamine system that it does this. It does this on the body system too. Like it helps restore things back to their normal working state. But specifically, this effect has been noticed and noted in their dopamine studies. Wow. And it helps counteract a lot of problems when your dopamine levels are too high consistently or too low consistently, which is a complex and interesting effect that is rarely seen in most of our known compounds. There's not very many of them that have that sort of restorative and modulatory effect on your neurotransmitter, specifically your dopamine system, in that it kind of restores it back to the way it should be.
This really speaks to how like the peptide is so profound because of its distributed mechanisms that all have the same effect on different mechanisms within the body and the brain, which is just so interesting. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And would also potentially have, this specifically would also potentially have implications for things such as over amphetamine use, methamphetamine recovery, like other stimulant type recoveries that happen, or issues that arise from overuse, as well as potential, treatment even for things like ADD that is known to result from an imbalanced like dopamine, system.
I wonder if there could be some implications for addiction recovery if it's a normalizer when it gets back to its proper state. That seems to be implicated for addiction potentially.
For things that are based in mechanisms that it can affect, I would say probably like dopamine, for instance. If something is primary mechanism is through the dopamine system, or the reward system, I can see BBC, helping with that,
for sure.
But now a couple of the other areas that the studies have kind of shown it can assist in that are kind of unusual too, is specifically in peripheral nerve regeneration. There's some pretty strong evidence that it can help damaged peripheral nerves grow and recover their function, which is pretty incredible. And some one of the interesting things about it, and they've done a lot of studies both on rats and dogs on this. So their animal studies are kind of split between both rats and dogs. And I think if I remember correctly, they were beagles and I can't remember what the other one was. But there's another breed of dog. But it's what's interesting is that its half-life, BPC's half-life, is super short. It's 30 minutes. That is insanely short. For a compound, especially one that has this much of an effect. the effects last way longer. So its effect on your system is enormous, but it only stays in your system for a very short period of time.
The active compound is around 30 minutes. But the cascading effects is 24 hours or more.
Right.
Wow.
Isn't that nutty?
It is a little nutty. That's for sure. Yeah. Wow.
So with that though, with that said, and there being a lot of potential benefits, but also and like animal research to suggest those benefits, like a good amount of data to work with.
Yeah.
We would think that there would be human studies that would be happening.
Yeah.
And that there'd be also a lot of human data because people would be getting excited. Is that not the case?
Yeah, it's kind of a factor that really is interesting. It's like almost all of what we're talking about that is so exciting is all from animal studies. We really don't know how these pretty incredible effects from the animal results will actually translate to human bodies and diseases. And so there are some anecdotal reports of people using it, and there have been some small pilot studies, but they're really not sufficient or validated by the actual scientific standards for drugs. And so they lack kind of the necessary rigor that control groups and blinding studies have. And, human studies have even been canceled or stopped without.
Wait. So there are actual studies that have been started on BPC-157
and
then canceled.
Yeah. So they have been stopped without publishing any of the results. So we kind of don't even have what they found in those small clinical studies. They pretty much just canceled the research and said, all right, we're just going to forget about this. It's not available to the public.
And they didn't really say why.
Really didn't say why. And it's really sad that is the case because of this incredible healing property that it has on such a wide scale. I mean, you could go into theories about the actual profit incentive for the pharmaceutical companies overall because of its encompassing effects.
Sure, that's a logical conclusion to come to as to the reasoning behind any study that is done or isn't done. For a pharmaceutical company, their main motivator would be, is this paying for this study, which is going to cost a buttload of money? Is that going to be worth it for us in the long term? Do we see enough evidence both going in and during the trial to continue to suggest this is going to be worth it for us? And I could see instances where something seemed generally beneficial, but not super beneficial at any specific thing they were trying to find a drug for. Where that would be something that wouldn't be worth developing because how would they then really market it for a condition?
Exactly, because they're not like a general health clinic. It's different for a pharmaceutical company.
Exactly,
it's trying to target specific pathways and systems,
and that's part of another indicator of one of the flaws in our medical system.
That's for sure.
Is the targeting of not necessarily symptoms, but like the targeting of creating drugs for problems specifically, rather than creating drugs for healing and preventing of problems. And the money-oriented nature of our system, and as a result, the pharmaceutical industry, which kind of developed as a product of the system results in a very self-minded, self-oriented, focus of, if something's not beneficial for me financially and primarily, then it's not worth developing for you. And on top of that, you consider all of the legal blockages, like roadblocks that they have to deal with, and all of the cost of the different things that go into each of these studies, and adding up all that together, and you now have something that you now have a situation where these compounds, like the ones that we see with the race TAMs and the BPC, these are all end up getting stuck in the research phase because they're not really good at fixing one specific problem. They're just good.
Yeah, they're just good for general applications. Right. Yeah. And so that's kind of led to this drug is not approved by the FDA or any other major regulators. And it can't be legally marketed as a drug or a dietary supplement. Same with the race TAMs, which is really sad, and can only be sold under like very rigorous oversight for research purposes only.
Right. Not for human consumption.
Not for human consumption, even though I might consume it. I'm not a human, though. I'm an alien, I promise.
I eat things that aren't intended to be eaten. Why shouldn't I drink things that aren't intended to be drunk?
Exactly. Yeah. And I know I actually have seen some gym influencers that I follow take BPC-157 because of its regenerative effects, and they've noticed that it works fairly well for muscle recovery.
Well, one thing to note is that it is one of the banned or prohibited substances listed by WADA.
So if you're a professional athlete, you really can't take it.
And I'd imagine that has to do with the fact that it increases recovery time, muscle repair time, and also growth hormone levels.
Yeah, that's also a pretty major factor as well.
And so the reality is, we have a kind of an idea of its safety profile. Like it's considered one of the more, safer, peptides that are in the research, chemical class, but we don't know it for 100% sure because we haven't had the extensive human trials that our modern system likes to use as the verification for that status. And so, with that, kind of, if we wanted to get it there, what we would need to do is we would need to have like some more rigorous human trials with actual results published that follow from beginning to end. They need to be fairly large, and they would need to be pretty transparent, as well as have all of the modern mechanisms that we employ to eliminate error, such as double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. And so it's not at the phase where, according to modern standards, medicine standards, it is considered safe for human consumption. But as far as research chemical compounds go, and the amount of research that has been done on it, and the potential risk involved that has been demonstrated so far, as far as side effects and negative interactions that we've seen with body, it's a pretty safe compound.
And it's actually implicated that some of the side effects might actually be more so about the purity of the unregulated products that are being got by people who take it
That's true.
Anecdotally.
That's another thing that I've noticed. A lot of times people don't seem to consider when they're posting their opinions on a substance, especially anecdotally.
No one talks about the actual.
Nobody talks about not nobody. That's a generalized statement. Very rarely do I see people talking about the fact that their source might be the problem, and that mentioning that as one of the factors, as well as their own expectations for the supplement going into it, their own body chemistry and metabolism, as well as the anything else that they were taking as well that could interact with that thing's effectiveness. And so all that to say that it's important to remember there are factors that can affect its effectiveness beyond just the compound itself.
Exactly.
And its interaction with your body.
Yeah. So test the purity, look at your sources.
Be sure the source has reliable third-party testing. If you're going to get it, you want them to be posting the results of their third-party testing on their batches with batch numbers and all that kind of stuff, so that you can verify that the stuff that you're getting is always being tested, and also know just the purity of, in general, like, okay, you got this batch that didn't seem as effective and was only at this percent purity, but this other one that did seem more effective was okay, that might be why, because it was a higher purity, things like that. So and you also want to avoid unhealthy stuff in your residues in your your chemicals, so with like heavy metals and other stuff. So that's just good in general to make sure they're having third-party testing.
So the number one priority right now when it comes to the data of BPC-157 is it needs rigorous human clinical trials, just to know more about how it interacts with human physiology. And we need well-designed placebo-controlled trials to prove that it's safe and works for specific conditions. In humans, if we can find a particular specificity that it's really good at working with, we might be able to convince a particular pharmaceutical company that this is something actually worth investing in. So more research needs to be done in that way. And we need to figure out, the best doses, how to give it, for how long, and understanding, the pharmacokinetics and how the human body absorbs, distributes, and metabolizes this particular drug. And if short-term trials are promising, then I think some long-term trials will be instated and pursued, which could be interesting. But that's BPC-157.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's
I mean, to be honest, it's one of those that's like very alluring to me as almost a daily supplement. Like, it'd be one of those that I would be willing to risk, and if it goes well, and it seems to be helping with things, be willing to add it to at least maybe a yearly cycle.
Well, what's particularly interesting is that I've noticed with lots of compounds is that the issue with them is actually the breakdown and the enzymatic breakdown of the compound, and the fact that it's not. And so the fact that this has such quick breakdown with such long-term effects suggests that this actually might yield really positive results, in my opinion. I've noticed. So it's definitely something to consider at your own risk, but at the same time, let's try to get this stuff.
It's always a cost benefit weight ratio that we consider. There is not talking about cost as in the price of it. I'm talking, well, that's relevant because it can be expensive, but the cost as in what is your reason for wanting it, and then what is the risk in taking it, and is that ratio worth it? Like, so if somebody was dealing with organ failures and something that was already going wrong and was getting worse, that's or a system that was really struggling to repair, like, I can see those as being sufficient enough reason for that. But if you're just in general pretty healthy individual already, maybe not worth risking.
Maybe not. I mean, to some degree, it allows. Well, what's interesting is like mild stressors, like during workouts or running, different things of that nature, provide and facilitate a lot of these natural, either neuroplastic effects or body healing processes throughout the body and the fascia system. So if you were to take something like BPC-157, you could even start to up the stress of environments if you're a healthy adult, while still maintaining a really good healing process within the body. So you could potentially, with the help of BPC-157, stay healthy for a lot longer and by being able to put more stress on your body and facilitating more exceptional growth all around. So that's something that I'm considering about this, in conjunction with other like longevity supplements. It's just interesting. It's very interesting. This is like, if there was one peptide that I wish could have more research right now that's coming out, it would be this one, because oh my goodness, I mean, just the exceptional results from the animal studies just suggest that it's really good.
And the multifaceted approach, and the fact that it has on so many different systems means that its potential is scaled for like the research that is being done. It's scaled so much further, like one human research study could yield so much information.
I'm curious about the gut interactions, like the human gut interactions.
And I think that might be what pharmaceutical companies are worried about. It's the fact that one human study could yield a lot of different avenues to pursue, and as a result, something that is hard to actually narrow down to something specific. It's like it brings up a lot of different things, potential areas that could be applicable. Where do we research? Where do we focus our research?